The chamber hummed with the low thrum of alien voices, a cacophony of clicks, whirs, and sibilant hisses echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the Galactic Concorde's He was the thinker, piecing together the why behind the stars, while she was the doer, who'd pulled her freighter through asteroid storms that would shred lesser hulls. But now, with the nebula's riches within reach, minerals to fuel drives, space to breathe, they were being reined in like errant pups. Kai's hand brushed her. Elias ignored it all, boots echoing on the polished deck as he headed for the docking bays. Captain Lena Voss waited there, her ship the Relentless, a sturdy human freighter that had hauled everything from or to orphans across the void. Lena leaned against the airlock frame, arms crossed, flight suit scarred from years of micrometeor dodges. She spotted Elias and pushed off, stride purposeful. "You look like you just signed away the stars themselves," she said, voice low but steady. Beside her stood Jax, the engineer, a wiry man with grease-streaked hands and a perpetual squint from staring into engine cores. He nodded once, silent as always, but his fingers twitched like they itched to fix whatever mess Elias had brought. "It's done," Elias replied, forcing a grim smile. "No more begging for scraps from the Concorde. We're on our own now." He glanced at the viewport, where the Relentless loomed like a faithful beast, hull patched but proud. The challenge ahead wasn't abstract. Rumors swirled of blockades of alien fleets enforcing the Concorde's stability protocols. One wrong jump, and they'd be adrift, resources dwindling in the black. They boarded without fanfare, Jax sealing the hatch while Lena punched coordinates into the NAV console. The ship groaned to life, engines rumbling like a waking giant. As they cleared the station's gravity well, Elias settled into the co-pilot's seat, watching the stars streak by. "First stop, Epsilon Eridani. We've got allies there, old mining outposts, human holdouts who never bowed to the Council." Lena's hands danced over the controls, but her jaw tightened. "Allies or not, the Concorde's patrols are thick out there. If they scan us..." She trailed off, eyes flicking to the sensors. A blip appeared, faint but closing. Jax cursed under his breath from the engine bay, voice crackling over the intercom. "Power surge incoming. They're hailing." Elias felt the ship's deck vibrate as the incoming vessel matched their velocity. On the view screen, a sleek Concorde interceptor materialized, angular lines screaming efficiency, weapons ports glinting. "This is Enforcer Vessel Vigilant," came the modulated voice, a chorus of alien harmonics. "Freighter Relentless, you are in violation of withdrawal protocols. Power down and prepare for boarding." Lena's knuckles whitened on the yoke. "Not today." She banked hard, the ship protesting with a metallic screech. Elias gripped the armrests, heart pounding as proximity alarms wailed. Jax's voice cut in again, "Rerouting auxiliary power, give me 30 seconds." The interceptor fired a warning shot, a plasma arc sizzling past their hull, close enough to paint the viewport with ionized glow. They twisted through the debris field of an old asteroid belt, Lena's maneuvers sharp and instinctive, born of smuggling runs and worse odds. The Vigilant pursued, superior drives eating the distance, but Jax's hack bought them a burst of speed. Elias monitored the scans, spotting a narrow gap in the rocks. A gamble, but their only shot. "There," he pointed. "Thread it." Lena nodded, diving in. Chunks of ice and stone whipped by, the ship shuddering as a fragment grazed the shields. The interceptor hesitated, too bulky for the squeeze, and in that moment they broke free, engines flaring toward open space. But as the stars stabilized, a new alert flashed, hull integrity at 87%. A hairline crack in the cargo bay, venting atmosphere. Jax emerged from below, face smudged, wiping sweat. "We made it, but she's hurting. That shot clipped us worse than I thought." Lena eased back on the throttle, breath steadying. Elias met her gaze, the weight of their choice settling like dust after a storm. Epsilon Eridani was still hours away, and the Concorde wouldn't forget their defiance. One escape didn't erase the hunt, it only sharpened it. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Endeavor's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the swirling chaos of the nebula veil, a roiling mass of ionized gas and rogue plasma bursts that had claimed more ships than she cared to count. Jax hunched over the console beside her, fingers dancing across the holographic displays, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Captain, the stabilizers are holding, for now," Jax said, voice steady but laced with that wry edge he always fell back on when things got dicey. "But if we push through this soup without recalibrating the shields, we're looking at a hull breach in under an hour. Remember that freighter last cycle? Turned into confetti." She nodded, eyes fixed on the nebula's heart, where tendrils of violet fire licked at the edges of their path. The council had warned them about this route when humanity walked out of the hall, delegates' voices echoing with smug certainty. Stay in the lanes, primitives. Your ingenuity won't save you from the star's wrath. But the lanes were choked with blockades now, enforcers from the Vexery Collective barring the way after the split. No choice but to brave the veil. Recalibrate then, Elena replied, tone clipped, betraying the knot in her gut. Divert power from non-essentials. Life support can wait if it means we don't fry. She leaned forward, tracing a finger along the projected trajectory. The Endeavor was no warship, just a survey vessel repurposed for the Exodus, carrying the seed of a new colony on Epsilon Eridani. 200 souls in cryo below decks, counting on her not to turn them into stellar dust. Jax muttered under his breath something about glory hounds and their shortcuts, but he complied, hands blurring as he rerouted the flows. Alarms chirped softly, a warning from the NAV computer about an incoming plasma flare. Elena's pulse quickened. The first plan had been simple: skirt the nebula's edge, use its magnetic fields to slingshot around the blockades. But the Vexery had anticipated that, seeding the fringes with sensor buoys that lit up like beacons, drawing patrols. Now, deep in the heart, evasion meant survival. The ship shuddered as the flare hit, shields flaring blue against the onslaught. Sparks danced from a nearby panel, and Elena smelled the acrid tang of melting circuits. Report, she barked. Shields at 60%, Jax shot back, slamming a fist on the override. That was a big one. If we don't adjust course, the next'll punch right through. She scanned the readouts, mind racing. The colony pod was secure, but losing it meant starting from scratch, years of prep gone. Humanity's bold exit from the council wasn't just politics. It was a gamble on self-reliance, proving they didn't need the galaxy's handouts. But pride wouldn't shield them here. Helm 15 degrees starboard, Elena ordered. Thread the needle, aim for that density pocket at Mark 047. It'll buffer us. The pilot, a young ensign named Kira with steady hands and a cautious streak that mirrored Jax's, hesitated only a beat before complying. The Endeavor groaned, engines straining as it banked into the tighter weave of the nebula's currents. Gas clouds parted like veils, revealing glimpses of shattered asteroids tumbling in the glow. Jax glanced at her, a half-smile cracking his tension. You sure about this? Looks like flying blind through a fireworks show. Better than the alternative, Elena said, forcing a grin. Council said we'd regret leaving. Let's not prove them right just yet. Another flare bloomed ahead, closer this time, its heat washing over the hull like a solar kiss. Kira's voice cut through the rising din. Incoming, evasive. Elena braced as the ship twisted, the world outside blurring into streaks of color. The flare grazed them, shields whining in protest, but they held. For the moment. Deeper into the veil they plunged, the nebula's embrace tightening, whispering promises of the void beyond. But with it came the first real cost, a distant klaxon from engineering signaling a coolant leak. Jax cursed, already moving. Go, Elena told him. I'll hold the bridge. He paused at the hatch, meeting her eyes. Don't do anything heroic without me. She watched him vanish down the corridor, the weight of command settling heavier. The council hall felt a lifetime away, its polished halls and alien debates a fading echo. Here, in the firestorm, history wasn't written in decrees, it was forged in the choices that kept them flying. And as the nebula roared, Elena wondered just how much more it would demand before they broke free. The view screen ahead showed the swirling nebula they'd plunged into an hour ago, its tendrils of gas glowing in hues of violet and crimson, masking their trail from the pursuing Krell vanguard. Marco Ruiz, her chief engineer, hunched over the console beside her, fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his voice carried that familiar wry edge. Captain, this nebula's got more interference than a bad comm link at a family reunion. Shields are holding at 60%, but if those Krell hunters push harder, we'll be spitting plasma. Elena nodded, jaw set. She'd led her crew through worse, pirate ambushes in the outer rims, hull breaches from micrometeor storms, but this felt different. Leaving the council hall hadn't just been a diplomatic snub, it was a declaration of independence, and the Krell, with their rigid hive-mind fleets, saw it as an insult to the galactic order. Now, with Lena Patel, the cautious diplomat who'd argued against the split until the last vote, coordinating from the comm station, they were all in it together. Options, Marco? Elena asked, keeping her tone steady. The bridge lights flickered as another ion burst rippled through the nebula. He glanced up, smirking despite the strain. We could vent the auxiliary thrusters, create a false heat signature to throw them off. Risky though. Might blind our own sensors for a bit. Lena turned from her panel, dark eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. And alert every scavenger in this sector? We're low on dilithium crystals as it is. One wrong move, and we're drifting fuel-less in a graveyard of stars. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring as a proximity warning lit the screen. Krell scouts, sleek, angular drones like predatory insects, were closing in, energy lances probing the haze. Elena's mind raced. The plan to slip through the nebula undetected had backfired. The Krell's adaptive algorithms had predicted their vector, turning cover into a trap. Execute the vent, Elena decided, voice cutting through the tension. Lena, jam their scans with the decoy protocols we pulled from the Council's archives. Make it look like we're fracturing into multiple signatures. Marco's hands blurred over the keys. Venting now. Hold on to your seats, this'll feel like a kick from a mule. A low groan echoed through the hull as the thrusters expelled superheated gas, blooming into a deceptive cloud that mimicked engine failures. The Endeavour lurched, inertial dampeners straining, and Elena felt the G-forces press her back, pulse thundering in her ears. On the view screen, the nebula's glow distorted, fracturing into phantom shapes that danced like ghosts. Lena's fingers flew, uploading the spoof data. They're biting, scans show 3 signatures diverging. But, Captain, their lead ship is adapting. If we don't clear this soup soon, they'll triangulate us. The stakes twisted tighter in Elena's gut. One wrong calculation, and the Endeavour, humanity's boldest envoy after the Exodus, would be scrap, a cautionary tale for any species daring to walk away from the Council's embrace. But surrender wasn't in their blood. Not after generations of scraping victories from impossible odds. Plot a course for the outer rim of the nebula, Elena ordered. Full burn on auxiliary power. Marco, reroute everything non-essential to propulsion. He chuckled, a spark of that unyielding human grit shining through. You got it. Let's show these bugs what happens when you chase ingenuity. As the ship surged forward, the nebula's heart pulsing around them like a living thing, Elena watched the pursuing blips scatter, buying them precious minutes. But in the rear sensors, a larger shadow loomed, the Krell mothership, inexorable and cold. They weren't out yet, and the cost of this gambit was already etching lines of fatigue into her crew's faces. Freedom, it seemed, came with teeth. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odysseus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the swirling chaos of the Veil Nebula, a graveyard of shattered stars that the Council had deemed impassable. But Ilara's team had charted a fringe route, betting on human stubbornness to thread the needle where alien navigators balked. Status on the shields, Mira? Ilara asked, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Mira, the cautious engineer with a knack for turning scrap into salvation, hunched over her console, fingers dancing across holographic readouts. Holding at 60% cap. But these ion storms are chewing through the emitters like acid. If we push deeper, we might lose integrity in the forward array. Myra's eyes, sharp behind augmented lenses, flicked up with that familiar worry line creasing her brow. She wasn't one for dramatics, but her caution had saved them twice already since ditching the Council's bloated bureaucracy. Beside Ilara, Jax leaned forward, wiry frame coiled with restless energy. The witty scout, always quick with a quip, scanned the sensor sweeps. Rivals on our tail too. That Krell frigate's matching our vector. Sneaky bastards must have slipped past the outer buoys. They're hailing us, but I bet it's not for tea. Ilara nodded, suppressing a grim smile. The Krell, those hulking opportunists from the Council's fringe alliances, hadn't taken kindly to humanity's exodus. Leaving the hall had been a declaration of independence, a refusal to bow to endless debates while the galaxy choked on its own red tape. Now, with the Odyssey carrying the seed archives, Earth's genetic vault and blueprints for a new start, the stakes felt like a noose tightening. Ignore the hail, Ilara decided, brave resolve stealing the bridge's tension. Divert auxiliary power to propulsion. Mira, reinforce the core emitters, we can't afford a backfire here. Mira hesitated, hands pausing. That'll strain the reactor. One surge and we're venting plasma. But she complied, muttering under her breath about reckless captains as readouts shifted in cascades of green and amber. The ship lurched as the first ion wave hit, a brilliant azure lash cracking across the view screen. Alarms wailed, sharp and insistent, cutting through the longer drone of status updates. Jack swore, patching in evasion maneuvers. They're firing probes, disruptors meant to scramble our nav. Clever if you're into dirty tricks. Ilara's mind raced. The initial plan had been simple: skirt the nebula's edge, lose the Krell in the interference, emerge on the unclaimed side with enough fuel for the colony drop. But the storms were fiercer than scans predicted, turning the fringe into a maelstrom. And now pursuit? It reeked of council meddling, a lesson in what happens when humans walk away. Adapt or die, she murmured, echoing the old Earth adage that had fueled their departure. Jax, plot a micro-jump through the densest cloud, use the ions to mask our signature. He grinned, wit flashing in his eyes. Risky. Might fry the coils, but hell beats getting boarded by lizard folk. His fingers flew, the ship groaning as it banked hard. Myra's console sparked, a warning light pulsing red. Shields dropping 40%. Cap, this is biting us back. The engineer's voice carried an edge, not panic, but the raw frustration of a plan unraveling thread by thread. The Odyssey plunged into the cloud, reality blurring into streaks of electric blue. Ilara felt the deck shudder, a deep tremor that spoke of overtaxed systems. Outside, the nebula's heart glowed like fractured sapphire, tendrils coiling around the hull in silent menace. One probe detonated nearby, the shockwave rattling lockers and sending loose panels clattering. Jump complete, Jax announced, exhaling sharply. Sensors cleared, showing the Krell frigate adrift in the outer haze, confused and blind. But victory soured fast. Myra's readout screamed overload. Reactors spiking. Mira yelled, slamming emergency protocols. Steam hissed from vents, the air thickening with ozone. Ilara unstrapped, moving to help, hands steady on the manual overrides. They wrestled the systems back from the brink, sweat beading on brows, breaths coming in ragged unison. The ship stabilized but limped now, fuel reserves dipped and shields flickering like a dying flame. The nebula receded, stars piercing the void ahead, but the cost lingered. A weakened vessel in uncharted space with the Krell regrouping behind. Ilara met her crew's eyes, the weight of their choices settling like nebula dust. We bought time. But they're not done with us yet. Jax nodded, wiping his brow. Mira just shook her head, already plotting repairs. In the quiet after the storm, the Odyssey pressed on, humanity's defiant path scarred but unbroken. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Endeavor's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the asteroid field's jagged silhouettes, each rock a silent sentinel in the void. Her crew, 3 souls she'd trust with her life, huddled around the tactical console, faces lit by the glow of readouts that painted a grim picture. They're gaining, Cap, murmured Jax, the wiry engineer, fingers dancing over the controls. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from fear but from the strain of pushing the ship beyond its limits. Jax was the cautious one, always double-checking seals and backups, but now his voice carried an edge of quiet defiance. Lieutenant Mira Kane, the sharp-tongued navigator, shot him a glance. Gaining? They're herding us like livestock. Those Krell interceptors are toying with us. Her wit usually lightened the bridge, but today it sliced through the tension like a laser. Mira leaned forward, plotting evasion vectors with the precision of a surgeon. Ilara nodded, jaw set. Brave didn't mean reckless, it meant choices under fire. The Council had branded them traitors for walking out, humanity's delegation, fed up with endless debates and alien posturing. Now the Krell enforcers chased them through this forsaken belt, a neutral zone turned hunting ground. One wrong move, and the Endeavor would be scrapped, their message of independence lost forever. Divert power to shields, Ilara ordered, voice steady. Jax, reroute auxiliary from life support if you have to. We need thrust. Jax hesitated, eyes flicking to the environmental gauges. That'll drop oxygen reserves by 20%. We can't, now, she cut in, meeting his gaze. He nodded, swallowing hard, and complied. Alarms blared softly as systems strained, the ship lurching forward in a burst of acceleration. Myra's hands flew across her panel. Incoming fire, evasive pattern delta. The Endeavor twisted, a grazing plasma bolt scorching the hull with a metallic screech. Sparks danced from a nearby console, and Ilara smelled the acrid tang of melting circuits. They're closing the net, Mira said, frustration creeping in. That early feint into the field worked at first, drew them off our trail, but now they've adapted. Flanking from the debris clouds. Ilara's mind raced. The plan had been simple. Slip through the asteroids, reach the hyperlane to rally other human outposts. But the Krell's adaptive AI had predicted their path, turning the sanctuary into a trap. Resource shortage hit hard now, Fuel cells at half, shields flickering. One more hit and they'd lose integrity. Options? She asked, scanning the field. A massive boulder loomed ahead, surface pocked with ancient craters like the scars of forgotten wars. Jax wiped his brow. We could vent plasma from the exhaust, fake a core breach, make him think we're done. By time to swing around that big rock. Mira snorted. And if they call the bluff? We're sitting ducks. It's a risk, Ilara agreed, but her eyes narrowed on the scan. Something glinted in the boulder's shadow, a derelict probe, maybe salvageable. Human ingenuity had built this ship from scraps once. Perhaps it could again. Do it. Mira, plot a slingshot maneuver. Get us behind that rock. The bridge thrummed with activity. Jax initiated the vent, a plume of superheated gas erupting from the rear, lighting up the sensors like a dying star. The Krell ships veered, formations tightening as they probed the illusion. Ilara watched the distance close. Hold steady. The Endeavor skimmed the asteroid's edge, gravity tugging at the frame with a groan of stressed metal. Mira hooped softly as they cleared it, but Triumph soured fast. An interceptor rounded the far side, weapons hot. Adapt or die, Ilara muttered, slamming the comms. All hands brace. The shot connected, not fatally but enough to shear off a sensor array. Alarms wailed, red lights bathing the bridge in bloody hues. Jax cursed, patching systems on the fly, while Mira recalibrated NAV with half the data. We lost the probe signal, Mira reported, voice tight. But, wait. That derelict, it's broadcasting a weak beacon. Old human Frex. Ilara's pulse quickened. A lifeline? Or another Krell trick? The stakes pressed in. Lose the ship, and humanity's bold exit from the Council became a footnote. Win this, and they might ignite a spark. Lock on, she said. Jax, can we interface remotely? Pull whatever data it's got. He nodded, already splicing code. On it. But shields are at 15%. We can't take another round. The Krell reformed, closing in like wolves scenting blood. Ilara stood, resolve hardening. Teamwork had gotten them this far, grit binding them tighter than any alloy. Push her, people. History's watching. As the Endeavor dove toward the derelict, engines straining against the void's pull, Ilara felt the weight of it all. Not just survival but the echo of their departure rippling outward. The Council Hall's sterile debates felt worlds away. Here in the crush of real peril, they forged something unbreakable. The dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the bridge of the Endeavor, casting long shadows over the consoles where Captain Elena Vasquez hunched, her fingers dancing across the haptic interface. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from heat but from the relentless calculations scrolling before her. The alien vessel's engines had failed spectacularly an hour ago, stranding them in the nebula's heart, where ionized gases played havoc with every sensor. Beside her, Dr. Kai Rin, the xenobiologist, muttered under his breath, his usual wit sharpened to a blade by frustration. If these Krell crystals were meant to stabilize the warp core, someone's got a twisted sense of humor. They're fracturing faster than my patience. Elena didn't look up, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. We knew the risks when we bolted them in. Focus on the containment field. If it breaches, we're venting atmosphere into vacuum. Across the compartment, Lieutenant Mira Torres gripped the armrest of her station, her cautious nature warring with the fire in her eyes. She'd argued against integrating the Krell tech from the start, back in the Council Hall when humanity walked out, but now doubt had no place. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull, a slow corrosion that promised to eat through the outer plating in days, maybe less. Their small crew, just the 4 of them handpicked for this rogue mission, faced the real cost. No reinforcements, no Council aid. History had followed them into the void, but survival demanded they forge ahead. Kai slammed a fist on his console, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the confined space. Fields holding at 60%. But the crystals are resonating with the nebula's EM pulses. It's like they're singing to the damn gas. He pulled up a holographic projection, the fractured lattice spinning in midair, veins of purple energy pulsing erratically. Elena leaned in, tracing a pattern with her finger that made the model stutter. Human intuition, that's what the Council had dismissed. Too unpredictable, too gritty. But here it was their edge. Reroute the auxiliary power through the secondary relays. Dampen the resonance with a counter-frequency. Mira, sync the NAV computer to isolate the pulses. Mira nodded, her movements precise, fingers flying over keys that whirred softly. She'd always been the anchor, the one who double-checked every variable, but even she felt the pull of desperation. The first plan, punching through the nebula's edge with full thrusters, had backfired, the crystals overloading and knocking out primary power. Now, adrift, the stakes pressed in, oxygen recyclers straining, food stores finite, and the Krell artifact they'd salvaged from the derelict station whispering secrets in the cargo bay that none of them could yet decipher. Sync complete, Mira said, her voice tight. Frequency locked. But Captain, if this doesn't work? It will. Elena's tone brooked no argument, though her mind raced through contingencies. The artifact, a relic from a long-extinct race the Council had ignored, held data on nebula navigation, or so their scans suggested. Walking out of the hall had been humanity's gambit, a declaration of independence from bureaucratic paralysis. Now, it meant solving this alone with ingenuity born of necessity. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing as the containment field dipped to 40%. Kai cursed in Mandarin, diving into manual overrides. Crystals are destabilizing, we need to vent the excess energy. Elena's hand shot out, grabbing a manual lever, her muscles straining as she forced it down. The ship shuddered, a low groan vibrating through the deck plates, and for a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, the hologram stabilized, the purple veins fading to a steady blue. Mira exhaled, slumping back. Field at 75. We're holding. But the victory tasted bittersweet. The hull integrity readout blinked a warning, micro breaches forming like cracks in ice. The nebula's assault continued, a reminder that adaptation came at a price. Elena straightened, meeting their eyes. Good work. Kai prepped the artifact for interface. If we're rewriting history, let's make it count. Outside, the swirling clouds pressed closer, but inside, resolve hardened like forged steel. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold metal. The stars blurred past the viewport in streaks of light, a reminder that the Odyssey was pushing her engines harder than ever. Below, the Council's armada lingered like a swarm of angry hornets, their signatures flickering on the tactical display. Jax hunched over a console nearby, his fingers dancing across holographic keys, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air. We can't keep this up, Mira said, her voice steady but edged with the caution that had kept her alive through a dozen negotiations. She adjusted her glasses, peering at the readouts. The warp coils are overheating. If we don't vent soon, we'll tear ourselves apart before those enforcers even catch up. Elena nodded, not turning from the void. Brave didn't mean blind. She'd led the exodus from the Council Hall 3 cycles ago, pulling humanity out of that stifling bureaucracy where aliens debated while worlds burned. Now, with a ragtag fleet of colony ships in tow, the cost was hitting home. The initial plan, slip into the nebula for cover, had backfired spectacularly. The gas clouds interfered with sensors, turning their escape into a blind stumble. And the rival Krell faction, those scaled opportunists who'd always eyed human tech, had mobilized faster than expected. Jax snorted, wiping his brow. Venting means slowing down. And slowing down means we're target practice. Remember that drill on Vega Prime? Adapt or die, you said. Well, here's your die. His wit masked the fear, but Elena caught the tremor in his hands. He was the glue, the one who jury-rigged miracles from scrap, but even he had limits. She straightened, forcing calm into her limbs. Options then? No suicides today. The deck hummed beneath them, a low vibration that spoke of straining hulls and desperate souls in the lower decks. Families, engineers, the dreamers who'd followed her banner. Losing them wasn't an option. Mira tapped her tablet, pulling up schematics. The auxiliary thrusters. We could reroute power from life support. Short bursts to weave through the debris field ahead. It's risky, oxygen levels drop for an hour, maybe two. But it buys time. Jax's eyes lit up, the engineer in him overriding doubt. And I can patch the coils with that salvaged Krell alloy from the last skirmish. Won't fix it pretty, but it'll hold. Just don't ask me to make coffee afterward. Elena waited, the air thick with the scent of ozone from overworked circuits. Outside, an asteroid fragment tumbled lazily, its surface pitted like ancient bone. One wrong move and it'd punch through their shields. The stakes pressed in, not just survival but proving the Council wrong. Humanity wasn't the reckless upstarts they claimed. They were the ones who'd build from ashes. Do it, she said, voice cutting through the hum. Mira, coordinate with the fleet. Jax, you have 30 minutes. She clapped his shoulder, feeling the camaraderie spark like a live wire. No speeches, just action. As Jax dove into the wiring, sparks flying in brief arcs, Mira relayed the orders. Alarms blared softly in the distance, a chorus of tension. Elena returned to the viewport, watching the Enforcer's lights grow faintly brighter. The plan was a gamble, but in the black, every path was. And humanity had never shied from the bet. The Odyssey shuddered as the first reroute kicked in, air recyclers whining in protest. Elena held her breath, literally, as the ship lurched toward the debris field, a graveyard of forgotten wrecks from some long-ago war. Collisions loomed, silent and inevitable, but she trusted her crew. Grit had gotten them this far, it would carry them through the fire. Yet, as a Krell cruiser peeled off from the pack, its weapons priming with a telltale glow, Elena wondered if the cost would be more than engines and air. The Council's history was written in subjugation, theirs would be forged in defiance, but at what price? Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The void outside the viewport stretched like an endless black canvas, pierced only by the faint glow of the nebula's edge. They'd been chasing the signal for days now, ever since the Council's betrayal had forced their hand, humanity's exodus from that sterile hall on Epsilon Prime, where the alien delegates had voted to quarantine human expansion. But the signal, a rogue transmission from an old human colony, promised salvage. Enough dilithium crystals to fuel their fleet for years. Without it, they'd be adrift, easy prey for the Krell enforcers trailing them. Jax slid into the seat beside her, his tablet flickering with diagnostics. Engines are holding Cap, but that nebula's playing havoc with the sensors. It's like trying to navigate a sandstorm blindfolded. His voice carried that usual lilt, a wry edge that cut through the tension, but Elena caught the strain in his eyes. He'd been up for 30 hours straight, rerouting power to keep the shields from buckling under the ionized particles. She nodded, not turning. We push through. The Krell won't wait for us to catch our breath. The rival fleet had been a shadow since the Council vote, their sleek hunters designed for precision strikes, not the gritty endurance of human ships. One wrong move in this soup and they'd be ionized dust. A klaxon blared from the corridor, sharp and insistent. Lena burst through the hatch, her diplomatic robes swapped for a utilitarian jumpsuit, face pale under the red emergency lights. Collision alert. Debris field ahead, looks like remnants of an old mining rig. The cautious advisor had argued against this shortcut, her insights from Council negotiations warning of hidden traps in uncharted space. But Elena's gut had won out, caution wouldn't save them from starvation. Jax was already on his feet, fingers flying over the console. Evasive maneuvers. Thrusters at max, hold on. The ship lurched, gravity compensators whining as they banked hard. Through the viewport, jagged hulks of metal tumbled into view, relics from a forgotten era, spinning lazily in the nebula's grip. One fragment, the size of a shuttle, hurtled toward them, its surface scarred by plasma burns. Elena's heart pounded. She slammed the comms. All hands brace. Jax, can we tractor it? Negative, he shot back, sweat beading on his brow. Power's too low, shields are at 40%. The debris clipped their flank, a grinding screech echoing through the hull. Alarms wailed as a hull breach registered in the lower decks. Air hissed, then sealed off by emergency bulkheads. Lena steadied herself against the wall, eyes wide. We can't take another hit. The crystals are our only shot, but if we lose the ship... Her voice trailed, the weight of their isolation pressing in. No Council aid, no alliances, just three humans against the stars with history's gaze upon them. Elena straightened, decision crystallizing. Jax, vent the auxiliary plasma to boost the tractors. It'll fry the injectors, but it'll give us a window. Risky, without injectors repairs would take days, but it was adaptation or death. He hesitated a beat, then grinned fiercely. Human ingenuity at its finest. On it. As the ship shuddered again, Jax worked the overrides, blue arcs of energy lancing out to snag the debris and hurl it aside. The viewport cleared, revealing a narrow path through the field, the signal beacon pulsing stronger now. But in the distance, sensor ghosts flickered, Krell scouts closing in. The chase wasn't over, it was just heating up. Elena exhaled, the taste of recycled air sharp on her tongue. They'd bought time, but the cost lingered in the flickering lights and the acrid smell of overheating circuits. History followed, all right, relentless, unforgiving. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The asteroid field's debris pinged off the hull like relentless hail, each impact a reminder of how thin their luck had grown. Jax hunched over the auxiliary panel, his fingers dancing across the flickering controls, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. We've got maybe 10 minutes before that ion storm catches us, he muttered, voice steady but edged with the caution that had kept them alive this long. Kree, the Zarathian hovering nearby with its iridescent tendrils twitching, emitted a low hum of unease. The readings suggest the storm will disrupt our shields entirely. We must find a vector through the field, now. She nodded, eyes locked on the holographic display where jagged rocks tumbled in lazy orbits, a deadly maze born from some ancient cosmic collision. Humanity's bold exit from the Council Hall had led them here, chasing whispers of untapped resources on the fringe worlds, but the rivals, those sleek Vexery scouts, had turned the pursuit into a gauntlet. Their early plan to slip through the outer belt had backfired spectacularly when a miscalculated thruster burn drew the storm's attention, frying half their navigation relays. Now, with fuel reserves dipping into the red and Kree's ship too damaged to dock, escape hinged on a desperate improvisation. Jax, reroute power from life support to the forward emitters, Elena said, her tone clipped, brave resolve masking the knot in her gut. He shot her a wry glance, the wit in his eyes flashing even now. Breathing's overrated anyway. Let's see if we can punch a hole in this rock soup. As he complied, the air grew thicker, recyclers whining in protest. But the emitters hummed to life, projecting a faint gravitic pulse that nudged the smaller asteroids aside like reluctant boulders in a stream. Kree's tendrils extended toward the display, analyzing patterns with its innate spatial intuition. There, a narrow channel shifting but viable. If we align with the storm's leading edge, the electromagnetic interference might mask us from the Vexery. Elena traced the path with her finger, the hologram shimmering under her touch. It was tight, a gamble that could shear off their wings or worse, but the alternative was capture, and the data crystals they'd salvaged from the Council's abandoned archives, proof of humanity's overlooked innovations, couldn't fall into rival hands. The cost was already mounting. Jax's lingering limp from the earlier boarding skirmish, Kree's fading bioluminescence signaling strain on its symbiotic core. "Lock it in," she ordered, strapping into the pilot's chair. The ship lurched as Jax engaged the course, engines roaring against the void's pull. Debris whipped past the viewport, a silver streak here, a tumbling chunk there, the field closing like jaws. Tension coiled in the cabin, broken only by the rhythmic ping of impacts and Kree's soft, encouraging warble. Elena's hands steadied on the yoke, guiding them through the first twist with gritted teeth. A larger asteroid loomed, its cratered surface scarred by eons, forcing a sharp dive that pressed them into their seats. Halfway through, the ion storm's fringes licked at their shields, sparks dancing across the bulkhead. Jax cursed under his breath, patching a surge with makeshift wiring. "Shields at 30%, hold her steady, Cap." Elena did, weaving with the precision of someone who'd navigated worse in the Sol System's asteroid mines back home. Human grit, that's what the Council had dismissed. Now it was their edge turning raw endurance into survival. As they emerged from the channel's maw, the Vexery signatures blinked out on the scanner, confounded by the storm's fury. But victory tasted bittersweet, the crystals secure, yet Kree's glow dimmed further, a consequence of the power drain taxing its physiology. Elena exhaled, slumping back as the alarms faded to silence. "We made it. But we're not out yet." Jax grinned faintly, wiping his brow. "One storm at a time, right?" In the quiet aftermath, the stars stretched ahead, promising more trials, but also the history they'd forged beyond the Council's shadow. Elena gripped the railing of the bridge, her knuckles white against the worn metal. The view screen flickered with static, the nebulous ionized clouds swirling like angry specters outside the viewport. Alarms blared in short, insistent bursts, syncing with the pounding in her chest. Jax hunched over the console, his fingers dancing across the holographic keys, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Power surge in the core, it's feeding back into the shields," Jax muttered, his voice tight but laced with that familiar edge of sarcasm. "Like poking a hornet's nest with a plasma torch. We reroute now or the whole ship's gonna light up like a festival drone." Zorp's multifaceted eyes darted between them, his chitinous limbs clicking nervously against the deck. The alien diplomat had insisted on staying aboard after the Council's fracture, his cautious nature now an anchor in the storm. "Human recklessness," he chittered, translating through the implant. "The readings show gravitational eddies pulling us off course. If we don't stabilize, we will," Elena cut in, her tone steady, eyes locked on the swirling chaos ahead. She remembered the Council Hall's sterile echo, the dismissive waves from the elder species as humanity stormed out, declaring independence from their suffocating alliances. Now, history wasn't just following, it was chasing them through this godforsaken nebula, where the Council's abandoned probe had left a minefield of unstable warp nodes. The ship shuddered, a deep groan rippling through the hull. Elena's boots slid an inch before she braced. The initial plan, skirt the nebula's edge, use the human-modified engines for a slingshot maneuver, had crumbled when the first eddy snagged their tail, frying auxiliary systems. They'd adapted on the fly, jury-rigging the deflector array with Zorp's Xenotech crystals, but the cost was mounting: flickering lights, failing recyclers, and a crew on the edge of exhaustion. "Jax, divert from life support if you have to," she said, pushing off the rail to stand beside him. Her brave facade hid the knot in her gut. One wrong pulse and they'd be scattered atoms in the void. But turning back meant facing the Council's enforcers, admitting defeat to the very bureaucrats who dismissed human grit as unrefined impulse. He nodded, not looking up, his witty retorts silenced by focus. Lines of code scrolled past, a symphony of green and red. Zorp leaned in, his proboscis twitching as he interfaced a secondary panel, his caution yielding to necessity. "The crystals are harmonizing, barely. If we pulse them in sequence with your engines." The ship lurched again, harder this time, throwing Elena against the console. Sparks flew from a nearby panel, singeing her sleeve. She bit back a curse, tasting blood from a split lip. Outside, a warp node bloomed like a predatory flower, its event horizon yawning wide enough to swallow a moon. The alarms peaked, a cacophony that drowned thought. "Sequence initiated," Jax yelled, slamming the execute key. The deck vibrated as power surged, the crystals glowing through the bulkhead views. Zorp's claws scraped metal in rhythm, guiding the pulse. Elena held her breath, watching the node rush closer, the nebula's glow painting the bridge in ethereal blues and violets. For a heartbeat, it seemed they'd miscalculated. The node expanded, tendrils of distorted space reaching out. Then, the ship twisted, engines roaring in defiance. The deflector array hummed to life, shoving them sideways in a burst of improvised force. The node snapped shut behind them, a thunderclap of imploding vacuum that rattled the stars. They cleared it. The view screen cleared fractionally, the nebula's heart receding like a defeated beast. Elena exhaled, slumping against the rail. Jax wiped his brow, a grin cracking through the fatigue. "Told you, human engineering plus alien bling equals survival." Zorp's eyes dimmed in what passed for relief among his kind. A narrow escape. But the Council's shadow lingers, their probes will track us soon. Elena straightened, the weight of command settling back. The triumph was earned, but Pyrrhic, hull integrity at 62%, crew nursing burns and bruises. History had followed, alright, but they'd just written a new page, one etched in grit and unlikely alliance. Ahead, the stars beckoned clearer, a promise of uncharted paths, even as the cost echoed in every strained bulkhead. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of engines straining against the void, stars streaking past like fleeting promises. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair, her knuckles white as the view screen flickered with the incoming signatures: 3 Krell destroyers, their hulls scarred from a dozen skirmishes, closing in like predators scenting blood. Marcus hunched over the console, fingers flying across the patched-together interface, sweat beading on his brow despite the recycled air's chill. "They're locking weapons," Lena said from her station, her voice steady but laced with the caution that had kept them alive this long. She glanced at Elena, eyes pleading for one last diplomatic hail, but the channel had gone silent hours ago, severed by the Council's betrayal. Humanity's exodus from the hall had been a spark. This was the blaze. Elena nodded once, sharp and final. "Marcus, that jury-rigged shield, will it hold?" He didn't look up, his wit surfacing in the grin that tugged at his lips. "Hold? It'll sing. But only if we dance right. Give me 30 seconds to reroute the auxiliary power from life support. Might get chilly." The first volley struck, a shudder rippling through the deck like a giant's footfall. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing in rhythm with Elena's heartbeat. She unstrapped, crossing to Marcus in 3 strides, her hand steadying his shoulder. "We didn't walk out of that hall to die in the shadow of it. What's the play?" He tapped a final command, the ship groaning as energy surged. "We don't fight fair. Humans never do. Watch." The view screen shifted as their vessel, the Audacious, a relic refitted with sheer grit, veered into the debris field trailing the Council's abandoned outpost. Chunks of twisted metal, remnants of forgotten wars, loomed like silent guardians. The Krell fired again, but Marcus had woven their path through the wreckage, using the hulks as improvised buffers. One destroyer clipped a girder, sparks erupting in the vacuum, its formation fracturing. Lena's fingers danced over comms, broadcasting a looped distress signal mimicking Council frequencies, enough to sow doubt, make the Krell hesitate. Elena watched the tactical overlay, the enemy's vectors converging then, scattering as confusion rippled through their ranks. Now, she whispered, and Marcus unleashed the adaptation. A burst from the modified cargo bays, dispersing a cloud of microdrones scavenged from the hull's underbelly. They weren't weapons, not really, just sensor ghosts, holographic echoes of a full human fleet, projected with the ingenuity that had baffled the stars for centuries. The lead Krell ship banked hard, firing wildly into phantoms. In the chaos, the Audacious slipped through, engines flaring as it punched toward open space. A final graze from enemy fire tore at the hull, venting atmosphere in a brief, howling plume. Marcus's reroute had cost them a section of quarters, a lingering scar on their fragile home. As the destroyers fell behind, their pursuit faltering amid the illusions, Elena sank back into her chair. The stars steadied, the galaxy unfolding before them, vast and uncharted. Lena exhaled, her caution yielding to a quiet resolve. We made it. But the Council's watching. They'll come again. Marcus wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, the grin fading to something earned, weary. Let them. We've got history on our side now, and a few tricks left. Elena stared at the void, the weight of their choice settling like dust after a storm. Humanity had left the hull, and in doing so, carved a path forward, scarred but unbroken. The consequences lingered in the cold drafts and the empty bunks, but so did the fire that had carried them here.